But there's also an important story that's taking place in Gaza. It's about accusations that Israel may be using weapons that international law says they shouldn't use, at least not the way they're accused of using them. This is called White Phosphorus. This report is being filed by CNN's Ben Wiedemann.
Is Israel firing white phosphorus into Gaza? Human Rights Watch says yes, and is backed up by munitions experts. And this, say Palestinian doctors, is the result. Dr. Nefis Abu Shaban says he's been treating burns for 27 years, but says he's never seen anything like these. He says most of the severe burn patients have been sent to Egypt, but because of the fighting, this man, Adil, can't get out.
He was brought to us last night with severe burns on the back, the face, both lower limbs. It's about 47% total burn surface area. This resulted from some sort of bombs. It might be the bombs which contain phosphorus, as we said before, because his burns are not usual burns. It's severe, very deep burns with strange shape.
White phosphorus is known to burn flesh down to the bone. It's designed to provide illumination or a smokescreen in battle. Under an international protocol ratified by Israel in 1995, such incendiary weapons are allowed when, quote, not specifically designed to cause burn injury to persons.
There's not a per se prohibition against using white phosphorus in conflict, but there are significant restrictions as to when it's used and how it's to be used. For instance, it is illegal to use white phosphorus against any personnel, not only civilians, but even legal combatants. So it cannot be directed at personnel. So you're limited to having it directed at military targets.
International law says incendiary weapons cannot be used where there is a concentration of civilians, and Gaza is one of the most densely populated places on Earth. This house north of Gaza City was hit by something Sunday. It's been burning since 1 o'clock in the morning, Munir Hamada tells our cameraman around noon. If you move it with your feet, it reignites. You can't put it out with water, only with sand. This matches the properties of white phosphorus, which ignites on contact with air. Last week, an Israeli official told CNN, I can tell you with certainty that white phosphorus is absolutely not being used. Now Israeli officials have this response to questions on its use.
Any munition that Israel is using is with accordance to the international law. Israel does not specify the types of munition nor types of operations that it's conducting.
The precise extent to which Israel is using white phosphorus is unclear, but the use of such a controversial weapon in the crowded and confined conditions of Gaza is bound to raise questions. Questions Israel is, for now, hesitant to answer. Ben Wiedemann, CNN, Jerusalem.
It certainly makes you ask a lot of questions. Let's do this. Let's go over to our Twitter board if we can. I think maybe this question being posed by Nevin News puts it in perspective. It's not the question of using white phosphorus. It's the question of using it in a dense civilian-populated areas, which is, by the way, pretty true to fact of the way it's written in international law. Jim Clancy joining us now. What do you make of this, and what have you learned?
Well, it's a big controversy. You know, in anything like this, I always want to refer to an expert. I have an expert that's there in Israel right now trying to get into Gaza, works for Human Rights, Fred Abrahams, and he tells me, no, it's not illegal, but it's wrong to use it in a civilian area. It's a spectacular picture. A howitzer puts this up. There's an air burst, Rick, and then 116 of these wafers go down. Even if the guy covers it up with sand, as we saw in Ben Wiedemann's report, if they uncover that, it makes renewed contact with air, goes off.
So it's a chemical. So
but it's not a chemical weapon.
It's not a chemical weapon, but it's a chemical.
Right.
It's a dangerous chemical.
It's a very dangerous, very horrible injuries.
One that international law says you probably shouldn't use in a manner in which it affects either combatants or civilians in any way. In other words, you can use it in a place where you want to change an area or for military strategy, but don't use it on people.
Yeah, they say they're using it as an obscure scurrent, which means that it's going to cover their fighters, cover their tanks as they move into some of these areas. Howitzers fired overhead, the smoke comes down, the phosphorus comes down, moves everybody out of the way. They get out of the way, and then there's smoke to cover their troops' movement.
What kind of impact could this have, though, if it continues to be reported to the point where it is now, and you have somebody like Human Watch saying, Human Rights Group saying, look, there's a problem here. I think they're doing it, even though Israel is saying, no, we're not.
Human rights investigators and the international media are not getting into Gaza right now, so it's not going to be that big of a problem. And
is that a problem? If you are going to deny something and you're not going to allow reporters to go in there and cover it, you're going to be faced with these types of questions.
My friend Fred Abrams pointed something else out. He said, that's the most spectacular story, White Phosphorus. The one we should all be looking at, and he said both Israel and Egypt bear some responsibility here. Where are the civilians going to get out to? If this noose keeps tightening in Gaza, where do they go? How do they get out? There's no egress routes for any of them. They're trapped in there.
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation.